The rain didn't just fall on Harbor Bend, it assaulted it. It came down in solid, driving sheets past midnight, turning the southern port city into a slick mirror of neon and shadow. This was the kind of storm that rattled foundations and kept decent people inside. For Rowan LeDuc, it just meant a longer shift. She was an emergency medical technician, and the rain always made the city bleed more. Her ambulance, Unit 12, was a small, dry sanctuary against the howl of the wind off the water. The call came through on the private line, not dispatch. An anonymous male voice, rough as gravel, giving an address that made her stomach tighten. The Mariner Hotel. The Mariner was a skeleton, a once grand structure now left to rot on the edge of the Wharf District. It was a place you avoided, not a place you responded to. Yet, the voice had been specific. Rooftop, he's bleeding out. No sirens. Against protocol, against reason, she parked a block away, grabbed the heavy trauma bag and pushed through the chained lobby doors. The air inside was thick with mold and decay. The elevator was dead. 12 flights of stairs later, her lungs burned and her rain slicker clung to her back. The rooftop door screeched open onto chaos. The wind ripped at her, and the city lights seemed miles below. He was there, slumped against a defunct air conditioning unit. A man, soaked to the skin, his dark suit ruined. She saw the wound immediately, a messy graze across the chest, deep enough to be serious, shallow enough to be survivable. Rowan dropped to her knees, her training kicking in. "Sir, can you hear me? I'm an EMT." He only groaned, his head lolling. She applied pressure, her gloves slipping on the wet fabric. That's when she smelled it. Not just the salt of the sea, but the sharp, acrid bite of ozone. A low hum vibrated through the concrete beneath her. She glanced over. A nearby electrical junction box was sparking, the rain hissing as it hit the exposed wiring. A thin, greasy tendril of smoke curled from the vent at her feet. A smoldering fire, somewhere below, the hotel's ancient wiring was giving up. "We have to move," she grunted, trying to lift him. The smoke thickened instantly, changing from gray to a toxic, oily black. It wasn't rising from below, it was coming from the vent right beside them. It clawed at her throat, a chemical burn. She fumbled for the compact respirator in her bag, but her hands were clumsy. The world tilted. The man's weight became impossible. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was the junction box finally erupting in a shower of brilliant, deadly blue sparks. She woke up to the smell of cedar wood and old linen. Her lungs ached, but the air was clean. She was in a bed, the sheets heavy and impossibly soft against her skin. This wasn't a hospital. The room was vast, paneled in dark wood. The only light coming from a floor-to-ceiling window that showed the storm still raging over the Harbor Bend, but from a much higher vantage. A man stood by the glass, looking out. He was tall, dressed in a simple black shirt and trousers. One hand was professionally bandaged, the white gauze stark against his skin. He didn't turn, but he knew she was awake. "You inhaled a significant amount of smoke. The tea will help." Rowan pushed herself up on her elbows. Her head swam. "Where? Who are you? The man on the roof." "He's fine." The man turned. His face was sharp, intelligent, and carried a stillness that was more intimidating than any overt threat. This was a man who owned rooms just by standing in them. This, she realized with a cold prickle of dread, was Cassian Vale. She'd never seen him, but everyone in Harbor Bend knew the name. The Vale Syndicate didn't just operate in the harbor, they were the harbor. He was the man she had saved. He walked toward the bed, stopping several feet away. His eyes, the color of the storm-tossed sea, scanned her, not with menace, but with a disturbing, assessing calm. "Today is your 25th birthday, Rowan LeDuc," he said. It wasn't a question. She flinched. "How do you know that?" He ignored her, his voice quiet, a low murmur that cut straight through the sound of the rain. "From now on, stay?" The words hung in the air, simple and absolute. It wasn't a request, It wasn't an invitation. It sounded like a verdict. Her heart didn't just beat, it lurched, a painful, heavy slam against her ribs. Her gaze darted around the room, looking for an exit, for her bag, for anything familiar. She saw a painting on the far wall. It was a stunning, dark oil rendition of a working pier. She recognized it instantly. Pier 9. A cold knot formed in her stomach. Just yesterday, her EMT supervisor had issued a sudden, baffling memo all units were to avoid Pier 9, citing a vague structural safety audit by the Urban Intelligence Directorate. The UID was a new, shadowy city agency nobody knew much about, and their order had felt wrong. Cashin watched her recognize the painting. He made no move toward her, no gesture of comfort or threat. He simply went to a sideboard, poured steaming water from a silver kettle into a cup, and added a sprig of fresh mint. He placed it on the bedside table. Well within her reach, but without crossing the invisible line he seemed to have drawn. Drink it. He placed a small, impossibly heavy black card next to the tea. It was matte black, with a single string of numbers etched in gold. My private number. Do not go back to your station. Do not go to your apartment. Stay out of sight for 24 hours. It is for your safety. My safety? I was just doing my job. Rowan's voice was hoarse. Your job is why you're in danger. He gestured to a flat-screen television, muted in the corner. He turned the volume up with a remote. The local morning news was on. The lead story wasn't a rooftop rescue. It was a massive fire at the old fish market, blocks from the Mariner. The fire is being investigated as arson, the reporter said, her voice tinny. Police are seeking this person of interest, captured on security footage near the scene moments before the first alarm. The footage played, a figure in a dark rain slicker, hood up, carrying a heavy bag, disappearing down the alley beside the market. It was grainy, impossible to identify, but the slicker was standard EMT issue. The bag was the exact shape and size of her trauma kit. It was her, or rather, it was meant to look like her. They're framing me, she whispered, the blood draining from her face. They needed a credible suspect near the scene, Cassian said, his voice devoid of emotion. An EMT responding to a bogus call makes for a very clean story. Rage, cold and sharp, cut through her fear. This was insane. She was a paramedic, not a pawn. She swung her legs out of the bed, finding her boots, still damp, placed neatly on a mat beside it. Her uniform was draped over a chair, dry and smelling faintly of cedar. I'm going to the station. I'm telling them what happened. She pulled her boots on, her hands shaking. They won't believe you. They have to. She stood up, grabbing her uniform. I'm not staying here. I don't care who you are. I won't be involved in this. She stalked past him, refusing to meet his eyes, and found the door. It was unlocked. She wrenched it open and stormed down the opulent hallway to the private elevator, stabbing the button for the lobby. The elevator car was silent, paneled in the same dark wood as his room. As the doors slid shut, her phone, which she'd just found in her pocket, vibrated. A text from an unknown number. It contained only 9 words. Don't go to Pier 9 if you want to live. A cold shock, sharper than the smoke, paralyzed her. The elevator chimed softly, and the polished doors slid open onto the ground floor lobby. He was there. Cassian Vale stood waiting, as if he knew she would be in this exact spot at this exact moment. He hadn't run. He hadn't rushed. He had simply arrived first. He held her rain slicker, the one from the news, draped over his arm. You left this, he said. Rowan looked from the man to the coat, to the storm-lashed street beyond the glass doors, the two worlds hers, of sirens and saving lives, and his, of shadows and silent control, had just locked together, and she was standing precisely in the middle. The heavy glass door closed behind them, muffling the storm to a dull roar. Cassian tossed her slicker into the back of a black sedan, so anonymous it was menacing. The car's engine was a low, unheard vibration. Where is your unit parked? He asked, his voice flat. 2 blocks over. Covered parking on Drift Street. They drove in silence. The rain hammered the roof. Rowan's mind raced, trying to piece together the fish market, Pier 9, and the anonymous text. It felt like walking into a dark room where the furniture had all been moved. They found Unit 12 exactly where she'd left it, but it was no longer hers. Thick, official-looking tape, emblazoned with the stark blue logo of the Urban Intelligence Directorate. Stretched across the doors and windshield, a man in an expensive, rain-resistant trench coat stood under the concrete overhang, watching them. He was smoking, the cherry of his cigarette glowing in the gloom. He stepped forward as they approached, not toward Cassian, but toward Rowan. He had a politician's smile that didn't touch his eyes. Rowan LeDuc, a hard night to be on the clock. "Who are you?" Rowan demanded, stopping just short of the tape. "Agent Marlowe Quist, UID. He flicked his cigarette away. "Your ambulance is part of an active investigation. The fire at the fish market. Nasty business." He tilted his head. "You look exhausted. You know, a person who provides voluntary cooperation often finds their own situation. Simplified. We have a safe house. Protected witnesses. You should come with us." "I'm not your witness," Rowan said. Cassian hadn't moved from the car, but his presence was a physical weight in the damp air. Quist's smile tightened. "Everyone is a witness to something. Miss LeDuc, think about what you saw, or what you didn't see. It matters." He held her gaze a moment longer, a clear, unspoken threat passing between them, before he turned and walked to his own black car. "Get in," Cassian ordered, opening her door. "He thinks I did it." "He doesn't care if you did it." Cassian's knuckles were white on the steering wheel as he pulled out of the garage. "He needs someone to blame. You're convenient." "I have to go home. I need my ID, my spare keys." He nodded, already turning toward the Bayou Lantern, the crumbling apartment complex she called home. The place was a tinderbox on a good day, but it was hers. Or it had been. The door to her apartment, 3B, wasn't just unlocked, it was splintered. The cheap lock had been jimmied, the wood around the frame cracked. Cassian put a hand on her arm, stopping her before she could rush in. He went first. The small room was a disaster. Not vandalism, but a search. It was clean, methodical, and violating. Cushions were sliced open, her mattress was flipped. Her small desk was cleared. They hadn't just tossed the place, they had erased it. "They took my laptop," she whispered, but her eyes fixed on the wall. A framed photograph of her mother, a smiling woman in nurse's scrubs, was on the floor. The glass was shattered, and the photo itself had been ripped in two. It was an act of calculated cruelty. This wasn't a robbery. It was a message. "Who?" Her voice broke. Cassian scanned the room, his eyes missing nothing. He crouched by the desk. They weren't looking for valuables. He pointed, lying on the floor. Half hidden by the torn photo was a small, vibrant purple ribbon, the kind used for gift wrapping. Rowan frowned. "I've never seen that before." "I have," Cassian said, his voice turning hard. "It's the calling card of the Bittern crew. The hackers I thought they just did online scams. They've upgraded. They're moving into port logistics, trying to bypass my syndicate's control systems. They specialize in data theft and identity farming." He stood up, the pieces clicking into place with grim certainty. "They didn't just search your apartment, Rowan, they cleaned your memory." Rage finally burned through the shock. "I'm going to the station. I'm filing a report. The break-in. Quist, the fire, I'm telling my supervisor everything." She turned to leave, but Cassian blocked the doorway. "And what will you tell them that the city's most powerful new agency, the UID, is framing you, that a ghost crew of hackers left a ribbon, that I was the one you saved on the roof?" He took a step closer. "The UID doesn't want the truth, Rowan. They want a story. And right now, you are the main character." "So what do I do?" she yelled, desperation creeping in. "I just let them." "No," he said, his voice dropping. "You get a better lawyer." He didn't take her to a high-rise office. He took her to the Lighthouse Blue, a jazz club tucked into an alley off the wharf. The music, a mournful saxophone, spilled out into the damp air. Inside, it was dark, smelled of whiskey and history, and was completely empty except for a woman sitting alone in a back booth. She looked more like a university professor than a lawyer, with sharp glasses and hair pulled into a severe bun. Her name was Etta Gray. Rowan told her story, the words tumbling out, the anonymous call, the roof, the smoke, the frame-up, the apartment. Etta listened, her fingers steepled, never interrupting. When Rowan finished, Etta slid a tablet across the table. They were busy before they searched your apartment. On the screen was an invoice. Someone using your name, your social security number, and a perfect scan of your EMT credentials purchased 200 pounds of industrial-grade accelerant, the kind used in controlled demolitions. It was delivered 2 days ago to a warehouse near the fish market. That's impossible. I've been on shift. The fingerprints on the purchase order match yours, Etta said calmly. That's a lie? No, Etta corrected, tapping the screen. It's a lift. You reported your secondary uniform stolen from your locker at the station last week. Correct. A week is more than enough time for the Bittern crew to lift a perfect set of prints from the fabric and medical gear. Rowan sank back into the booth. She was trapped. Every piece of evidence pointed directly at her. How do I fight this? Rowan asked, her voice barely a whisper. You don't, Etta said. We prove who did do it. The Bittern crew is sloppy with their arrogance. They keep everything, every piece of data they steal. Every identity they farm, it's all in a central database. We get that database. We find the real transaction, and we clear your name. Where is it? That's the problem, Etta said. It's not a building, it's a mobile refrigerated container, a server farm on wheels, and according to my sources, it's moving tonight. Cassian, who had been silent, finally spoke. I'll put my people on it. He pulled out his phone. No, Rowan said, cutting him off. Both Etta and Cassian looked at her. I'm not hiding in a safe house while your men fix this, Rowan said, finding a steel in her voice she didn't know she possessed. I was a field technician long before this. I know triage. I know containment. This is my life. I'm in. Cassian studied her, the dim club light catching the sharp planes of his face. He saw no fear in her eyes, only resolve. Fine, Barrett, he said. But my rules, we're not saving lives tonight. We are saving yours. When I say run, you run. No questions. Before she could answer, her phone buzzed. She didn't recognize the number, but her gut told her to answer. Rowan. The voice was familiar, warm and full of concern. Owen Pike. He'd been a port cop for years, a friend, before he quit the force to run legitimate security for the Harbor Bend Port Union. Owen, how did you get this number? It doesn't matter. Listen to me. I'm hearing things, bad things, a fire, a UID alert tied to your credentials. There was a pause. And worse, I'm hearing whispers that you were seen with Cassian Vale. Owen, it's not what you think. He's poison. Rowan. Owen's voice was urgent, desperate. He runs that port. Nothing happens there, good or bad, without him knowing. Don't you see, if you're being framed, he's the one holding the brush. Get away from him. Now. He hung up. Rowan lowered the phone. The saxophone hit a low, mournful note. She looked at Cassian, his face an unreadable mask, the man the city feared, the man who had, so far, been her only protector, and the man her oldest friend had just accused of setting her entire world on fire. The Rook Levee was a scar of elevated asphalt cutting through the marshlands, slick with a fresh deluge. The rain fell in near horizontal lines, blasted by a wind that smelled of salt water and decay. Cassian drove the Vesper, a Vale-issue sedan with no plates and an engine that was a low, hungry growl. The car didn't fight the road, it gripped it. Beside him, Rowan wasn't watching the road. Her eyes were fixed on the glowing screen of a portable EMT diagnostic monitor, which she had jury-rigged to a long-range frequency scanner from Etta. She wasn't looking for a vital sign. She was looking for a digital heartbeat. There, she said, pointing. A half-mile ahead, a heavy thermal signature. moving fast. Through the strobe of the windshield wipers, she saw it, a refrigeration truck, its container gleaming white, barreling through the storm. Cassian didn't speed up. He maintained pace, a predator matching its prey. My team is cutting them off at the causeway. We stop them here, on our terms. He hit the lights, flooding the truck's cabin with high beams. The truck swerved, then accelerated. Cassian downshifted, the engine screaming as the Vesper shot forward. He didn't ram them. He pulled alongside, matching their speed at 70 miles an hour. The passenger door of the truck flew open. A man leaned out, leveling a shotgun. Cassian slammed the brakes, the Vesper fishtailed, the anti-lock system chattering, as a blast of buckshot tore through the air where they had just been. "Hold on," Cassian said. He spun the wheel, executing a perfect reverse J-turn, and fell in behind the truck. The truck's back doors swung open. 2 men, clad in black, crouched inside. "They're going to shoot," Rowan said, bracing. "No," Cassian said, his eyes narrowed. "They're going to jump." As he spoke, the truck slowed, and the 2 figures leaped onto the wet levee, rolling and coming up into firing stances. Cassian didn't slow. He accelerated past them, cutting off the truck again, forcing it to a screeching, sideways halt that blocked the entire levee. He was out of the car before it stopped rocking. "Stay down," he commanded Rowan. The 2 gunmen were sprinting toward them. Rowan watched from the passenger seat, her heart pounding a sick rhythm against her ribs. Cassian moved with a brutal economy. He met the first man, deflected the pistol, and struck him once in the throat. The man collapsed, gagging. The second man raised his weapon, but Cassian was already inside his guard, twisting the man's arm. Rowan heard a sharp, wet pop, a dislocated shoulder. The man screamed and fell. No killing, just efficient, terrifying neutralization. Cassian ripped open the container door. Rowan was right behind him, her medical bag slung over her shoulder. It wasn't explosives, it was a server room, humming and cold, the air thick with the smell of ozone and melting plastic. Temporary racks of servers blinked with frantic red and green lights. On a massive monitor, a live-streamed auction was in progress. They were selling port surveillance data shipping manifests, UID patrol routes, financial records. The bidder was a logo she didn't recognize, the 2-headed eagle of the North Cross Brotherhood. "They're self-destructing," Rowan yelled, pointing to a server that was smoking. "They're overloading the core. We have seconds." Cassian moved to the main console, but Rowan pushed past him. "That's not the problem. It's the cooling. Look." She ripped a panel off the side. The main coolant line was gushing fluid. "It's a medical problem. It's bleeding out." She grabbed a roll of heavy-duty compression bandage and gauze from her kit. "Hold this," she ordered, shoving a bypass tube at Cassian. She worked fast, her EMT training taking over. She packed the leak, then wrapped the ruptured line with the compression bandage, cinching it tight. "It's a tourniquet. It won't hold long, but it'll slow the core temperature." The system whined, and the red lights shifted to amber. "It's stabilizing," Cassian said, his voice laced with surprise. As he reached for the main hard drive array, his phone buzzed. It was a sound that seemed alien in the high-tech chaos. He answered, putting it on speaker. A woman's voice, smooth as velvet and cold as steel, filled the container. "Cassian, you're becoming dreadfully predictable. Cleaning up after the Bittern crew." "Seraphine," Cassian's voice was ice. "I'm feeling generous." The voice of Seraphine Hawthorne continued. "The North Cross Brotherhood is paying a premium for that data. Let them have it, in exchange for goodwill. I only ask for one small thing. The EMT. She's the key to this whole affair. Isn't she? Give her to me, and the Hawthorne Circle will forget you're trespassing." "She's not yours to bargain for," Cassian said. "Pity," Seraphine hung up. A high-pitched tone filled the air, a digital countdown. "Rowan, get out, now!" Cassian yelled. "The drive? It's not—" He grabbed her, shoving her toward the door. A section of the floor beneath the main server rack exploded upward. It wasn't a bomb, it was a soft floor charge, designed to destroy the hardware from below. The force of it threw them both backward. Rowan felt a searing heat and the impact of metal fragments. But she didn't hit the ground. Cassian had twisted mid-air, wrapping his body around hers, taking the full force of the blast and the shrapnel against his back. They landed hard on the wet asphalt of the levee, skidding. For a second, there was only the sound of the rain hissing on hot metal. Rowan pushed herself off him. Cassian. He was already moving, pushing himself to his knees, but he moved stiffly. I'm fine. You're not. She saw the dark stain spreading across the back of his black shirt. His bandaged hand, the one from the rooftop, was clenched, but she saw it tremble. It was the first time she had ever seen him show pain. He'd taken a piece of the server rack for her. He ignored her, stalking back to the smoking container. He reached into the wreckage and pulled out a single, heat-scorched hard drive. "Etta," he said into his phone, "I have it. Find out what they're hiding." He patched the drive through his car's encrypted satellite link. A moment later, Etta's voice came through the speaker. Grim. "I'm in. Cassian, this isn't just the Bittern crew. These are contracts, signed by the Urban Intelligence Directorate. The UID hired the Bitterns to create a critical infrastructure threat at the port. They needed leverage to bypass the Union and take federal control of the harbor." Rowan felt the blood drain from her face. The fire, the accelerant, it was all them. "You weren't just a scapegoat, Rowan," Etta said. "You were the pretext, a random EMT caught in the blast, a tragic, necessary pawn." Headlights cut through the smoke and rain. 2 heavy-duty trucks from the Harbor Bend Port Union rolled up, spotlights flooding the scene. Owen Pike jumped out of the lead truck, his face grim. He was flanked by 6 of his Union security men. His eyes found Rowan. Then they moved to Cassian Vale, standing beside her, bleeding in the rain. Owen's expression, once warm and familiar, turned to stone. The trust in his eyes, the friendship they'd shared, evaporated. It was a complete, devastating fracture. "Rowan," Owen said, his voice cold, official, "get away from him. We'll take it from here." "Owen, listen to me," she started. "He's not—" "He is the problem," Owen snapped. "My team is securing the scene." Cassian hadn't moved. He looked at Rowan, then at the hard drive in his hand. He ignored Owen completely. He held the drive out, not to the armed security chief, but to her. "This is your life, Rowan," Cassian said quietly. "You hold it." She took it. The drive was still warm. It was an act of absolute trust, a strategic surrender. He had just given her the only leverage any of them had. Owen's jaw tightened. "Fine, give it to me. I'll get it into official evidence." "No," Rowan said, clutching the drive. "It stays with me." "My team will escort you," Owen said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He motioned to 2 of his men. "Take her to my truck." Reluctantly, Rowan let them lead her away. Her eyes locked on Cassian. He was letting her go. She was halfway to the truck when she heard the sound, a sharp, distinctive crack that was not thunder. It was a high-velocity rifle shot. It didn't hit anyone. It struck the lamppost directly above her head. The light exploded in a shower of glass and sparks, plunging the levee back into darkness. It wasn't a miss. It was a warning. Seraphine, the UID, someone was watching, and they were aiming for her. In the immediate, blinding flash of the exploding lamppost, Owen's men had grabbed her, shoving her into the back of their truck. Cassian had simply vanished into the chaos of shadow and steam. But it wasn't Owen's truck that met her. It was the Vesper, appearing silently from a side street 2 blocks away. Cassian had pulled her from Owen's men with a quiet finality, a single look that promised a violence Owen's team was not prepared to meet. Now, they were hidden. The Cedar Street Depot was a relic, a vast skeletal building where the city's old electric trams had once come to rest. Their refuge was the attic, a cavernous space filled with the ghosts of machinery and smelling of dust, old oil, and the rain hammering on the copper roof. A single bare bulb illuminated a small cot, a table, and 2 chairs. Cassian sat on one, stripped to the waist, his back to her. The shrapnel wound from the container was worse than she'd thought, a ragged tear in the muscle, bleeding sluggishly. He hadn't asked her to tend to it, but her medical bag was on the floor. Rowan was at war with herself. Her entire life was built on a single, clean principle: you save everyone. You don't ask who they are. You don't judge. You just fix the damage. But Cassian was not a patient. He was the damage. He was the man who moved through Harbor Bend like a surgeon, excising threats with a cold precision she had witnessed on the levee. He used violence, contained and controlled, to protect, and he had protected her. The EMT in her recoiled from his methods, but the woman, cold and terrified, was undeniably drawn to the safety he offered. She opened her kit. The clink of metal instruments was loud in the quiet room. "You can't just ignore this," she said, her voice sounding hollow. "It'll get infected." He didn't turn. "It's not the first." "Sit still." She soaked a gauze pad with antiseptic. As she pressed it to the wound, he inhaled sharply, a rigid hiss of pain, but did not move. His skin was hot. As she worked, cleaning the wound, a memory surfaced. It was old, hazy, from when she was a child, her mother, home from a long shift at the public clinic, sitting at their small kitchen table. Her mother had been a nurse, a believer in the same code Rowan lived by. She'd been telling a story about a kid, a runaway she'd found in an alley behind the clinic, badly cut. "He was just a boy," her mother had said, her voice full of a sadness Rowan hadn't understood. Maybe 15. Tough. All angles and anger, but terrified. I stitched him up right there on a loading dock. Rowan's hands stilled. She looked at the network of old scars on Cassian's back, silver lines that crisscrossed the new, raw wound. "What did she say to you?" Rowan asked, her voice a whisper. Cassian finally turned his head, his dark eyes locking onto hers. The question didn't surprise him. "She told me I was bleeding on her clean supplies." He was testing her. She didn't react, just continued to tape the bandage into place. Her touch was professional, firm, betraying nothing. He let out a slow breath, and she told me not to let fear choose my future for me. The echo of her mother's words, a phrase she had heard 100 times, struck her with the force of a physical blow. It connected them, this dark, powerful man and the woman whose memory she worshipped, by a thread she never could have imagined. "She gave me this," Cassian said, his voice softer. He nodded toward his own discarded shirt, at the small silver whistle he used as a zipper pull. "Told me to use it if I was ever too scared to run. She saved my life." Rowan finished bandaging his back. She looked at his face, and for the first time, she saw the mask crack. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of his mouth. It was not the smile of the Veil Syndicate's boss. It held no control, no power. It was the smile of a 15-year-old boy in an alley, remembering a moment of kindness, the first seed of genuine trust, fragile and tentative, began to take root in the ravaged soil of her fear. Her phone vibrated on the table. A text from Etta. "UID is moving. They're issuing a material witness warrant. They will have every cop in the city looking for you by 6 a.m. You have 2 choices, Etta." The text was incomplete, but Rowan understood. Disappear or fight. "They're coming for me in the morning," Rowan said, holding up the phone. "They're going to arrest me." "Etta can have you out of the state by 3 a.m., Cassian said, pulling his shirt carefully over his shoulders, wincing as the fabric touched his new bandage. "A new name, a new life. You'd be safe." "No." The word was out before she'd even thought it. "No, this is my city. That was my mother's city. I'm not running from a lie." She held up the hard drive, still clutched in her hand. "This is the truth. They're afraid of it. So let's make them listen." "How? We broadcast it," Rowan said, the idea forming as she spoke, sharp and clear. "Publicly. Tomorrow night is the River of Lights Festival. The entire city will be at the waterfront. Harbor Street Radio. They have a community broadcast channel. We can patch this drive into their system. We'll play it on every speaker on the boardwalk." Cassian stood up, his face grim. "That's not a countermove. Rowan, that's a declaration of war. Seraphine Hawthorne won't let that happen. She doesn't just want the port. She needs the chaos of this UID takeover to break my syndicate's hold. A public reveal ruins her plans." His own phone buzzed. It was Owen. Cassian put it on speaker. "Vale." Owen's voice was tight with anger. "I don't know what game you're playing, but I'm getting Rowan out. I can get her into safe haven at the Port Inspector's Bureau warehouse. It's neutral ground. She'll be protected until the hearing." "No, that's not a safe haven, Pike," Cassian shot back, his voice like ice. "It's a holding pen. The Port Inspector's Bureau has been funded by UID grants for 6 months. You're not saving her. You're handing her over." He cut the call, the silence stretching. The weight of the two opposing forces, Owen's compromised light and Cassian's protective dark, pressed down on her. Rowan looked at Cassian, at the man her mother had saved, the man who had taken shrapnel for her, the man who killed to protect his world. The conflict inside her finally settled. It wasn't about ethics, it was about survival. She stepped toward him, into his space. He watched her, wary, his body tensing. She didn't stop until she was standing directly in front of him. Slowly, she lifted a hand, her fingers trembling slightly. She didn't touch his face. She didn't touch his uninjured shoulder. She laid her palm gently, deliberately, over the fresh bandage on his chest, where the bullet had grazed him on the rooftop. She felt the steady, strong beat of his heart beneath her hand. "I'm not choosing the dark, Cassian," she said, her voice low and steady. "And I'm not choosing the light. I'm choosing you." She watched his eyes. They darkened, the pupils dilating, but it wasn't the shadow of power she had seen before. It was something else, something raw, unguarded, and terrifyingly human. It was vulnerability. The single bare bulb in the depot attic cast a pool of harsh yellow light, drawing a stark circle around them in the vast, dusty darkness. Rowan's hand remained flat against Cassian's chest, feeling the solid, living rhythm of his heart. She was trembling, not from the cold, but from the terrifying free-fall of her own admission. He stood perfectly still, his body rigid, as if her touch were a charge he was afraid to detonate. He didn't pull her closer. He didn't push her away. He waited, granting her the control he himself so rarely relinquished. "I'm shaking," she whispered, the words costing her more than she'd imagined. "And it's not because of them. It's not Quist or Seraphine." She finally met his gaze, her own, wide and honest. "I'm terrified of this, of needing someone this much." His expression didn't change, but she felt his breath hitch beneath her palm. It was the only sign that her words had landed. Emboldened, she let her fingers move. It was a cartography of this new, dangerous territory. Her fingertips traced the line of his collarbone, brushed the damp, open neck of his shirt. She felt the warmth of his skin, the faint, clean scent of cedar and the metallic tang of the storm. He was all tension, a spring wound tight. She rose on her toes, a small, hesitant movement, and pressed her forehead to the side of his face, against the sharp line of his cheekbone. She closed her eyes. For a moment they just breathed, sharing the same small space, the same stolen air. His heart rate, which had hammered against her hand, began to slow, matching her own. He let her lead. When she drew back, it was only an inch. When she leaned in to kiss him, it was her choice. The first contact was soft, a simple, searching pressure of lips. It held no demand. It was a question. His response was a low sound in his throat, a surrender. And then the kiss deepened. It was not the brutal, possessive kiss she might have expected from a man like him. It was deep and slow, and spoke of a profound, banked hunger. It tasted of the mint tea he had made her, and the adrenaline of the long night. His hands, which had been frozen at his sides, came up. They didn't grab. They settled on her waist, his thumbs brushing the fabric of her shirt. His grip was firm, a silent anchor in the chaos. He held her as if she were the only solid thing in the room. Rowan pulled back, just enough to look at him. His eyes were dark, his defenses completely gone. A small, tentative smile touched her lips, and to her astonishment, he returned it. A faint, almost imperceptible curving of his mouth that was more intimate than the kiss itself. He started to speak, to say her name, but she put a finger to his lips. Not yet. She moved, stepping away from him, and sat on the edge of the wide, dusty windowsill. The rain lashed against the glass behind her, a frantic drumming that underscored the sudden quiet in her heart. Her feet brushed the floor. From this new vantage, she looked up at him. She held out her hand. He came to her, closing the small distance between them. She tugged him closer, until he was standing between her knees. Her damp jacket, the one she'd worn on the levee, was still draped over her shoulders. She let it slide off, her gaze never leaving his. It fell to the old wooden floorboards with a soft, final sound, like a sigh. He leaned in again, his bandaged hand coming up to cup her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheek. The rough gauze was a contrast to the surprising tenderness of his touch. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. It was a claiming, but also a question. She wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down, and the world narrowed to this. The sound of the rain, the smell of his skin, the solid warmth of his body shielding her from the cold draft of the window. He broke the kiss to press his face into the curve of her neck, his breathing unsteady. His lips moved against her skin, and he whispered 2 words. They were not a promise of love, or of forever. They were a vow of a different kind, the only kind he truly knew how to make. "You're safe." It wasn't a platitude, it was an oath, a pledge that his capacity for violence would never be turned on her. It was, for him, the ultimate declaration. Later, the single bulb was extinguished, plunging the attic into a darkness relieved only by the pale, gray light of the storm. Dawn came not as a sunrise, but as a slow dilution of the black. The rain had softened to a drizzle. They were on the floor, fully dressed, sitting with their backs pressed against the side of the cot. The tension of the night had broken, leaving a quiet, shared exhaustion. A thermos of lukewarm coffee sat between them, alongside a plastic-wrapped loaf of stale bread from an emergency kit. Cassian tore off a piece of bread and handed it to her. "This is the worst breakfast I've ever had," she murmured, taking a bite. "It's efficient," Mahi replied, drinking the bitter coffee straight from the thermos. "You'd call a block of nutrients efficient. You probably think sleep is a tactical error." He turned his head to look at her, and the slight smile was there again. It can be. The easy moment faded. The reality of the coming day settled. "Last night," he said, his voice quiet, "on the levee, when Pike's men took you." "What about it?" "It wasn't jealousy." He seemed to be sorting the words, unused to this kind of articulation. "I've dealt with rivals, Seraphine, the Brotherhood. They are problems to be solved. But when I saw you walking away, under his protection, it wasn't anger." He looked down at his hands. "It was disorientation. I lost my bearings." Rowan processed this. He wasn't a man who lost his bearings, ever. "You're used to seeing me in danger, Cassian," she said softly, turning to face him. "You see me as something to be shielded, a variable to control. I am, to you, a crisis." He didn't deny it. "Then learn to see me when there isn't one," she said, her voice firm. "Learn to see me when I'm just Rowan, not a target." He held her gaze. He was learning. This was the negotiation, more important than any treaty with the other families. "We need rules," she stated. "I agree," he said. "Rule 1. No more lies. Not about the risk, not about what you're doing, not about what Seraphine is doing. I walk into this with my eyes open." "Done." "Rule 2. My job, it's mine. I don't stop being an EMT because I'm with you. If I see someone who needs help, I help them. That is not negotiable." He hesitated. That was the hardest one for him. Your job is what made you a target. "My job is who I am," she countered. "You don't get to protect me by erasing me." He nodded, a slow, deliberate acceptance. Done. "Rule 3, she said, tapping his chest. "You protect my choices, not just my life. If I choose to run into the fire, you don't lock me in the truck. You find a way to cover me." Cashin looked at the woman before him, the EMT who had faced him down, patched him up, and seen the boy his mother had saved. He had told her to stay. He was beginning to understand what that would actually cost him. He reached out and took her hand. "Protect your choices," he repeated, sealing the pact. "I can do that." The daylight that filtered through the grime of the depot attic windows was a flat, unforgiving gray. It illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air and the screen of Etta Gray's encrypted laptop, where she had been digging for 10 hours straight. "Found it," she said, her voice rough from caffeine and exhaustion. She didn't look up. The UID's pet project. They signed a 3-month commercial surveillance pilot contract with a shell company called Kestrel Dynamics. Rowan leaned over the table, Cassian standing behind her, his presence a silent, protective shadow. "Kestrel Dynamics is clean on the surface," Etta continued, "but its funding is routed through a dozen offshore accounts. The minority shareholder, buried under 3 layers of incorporation, the Hawthorne Circle." "Seraphine," Cashin stated. It wasn't a question. "She's playing everyone," Etta said, finally looking up, her eyes sharp. "She's using the UID to legitimize her control of the port, hiring the Bittern crew to create the threat the UID needs as a pretext, and framing Rowan to light the match, the government and the underworld, all working to install her as queen." Before Rowan could process the sheer scale of the conspiracy, Etta's laptop chimed, an incoming call from Owen. Etta patched him through on speaker. "I have a problem." Owen's voice was stressed. "The Gulf Trade Commission just announced a last-minute community hearing tonight, right in the middle of the River of Lights Festival. They're claiming urgent matters of port security. It's a setup, a kangaroo court to rubber stamp the UID's takeover. Or it's an opportunity," Rowan said immediately. "A public hearing, we can use it, we can give them the drive." Owen seized on it. "She's right, it's a legal forum. If we present the Kestrel contract and the arson data, they can't ignore it. It's our best shot at doing this by the book." "By the book?" Cashin's voice was dismissive. "The book is written by Seraphine. You'll hand over the evidence. They'll classify it as national security, and Rowan will be arrested for possessing it. It's a trap. Pike." "It's better than your way, Vale," Owen shot back. "What's your plan? A back-alley war that gets more people killed?" "My plan," Cassian said, his voice dropping to a deadly calm, "is to cut the head off the snake. Seraphine isn't a politician, she's a banker. Her real power is her money. It's all laundered through a phony charity called the Auric Hands Fund." He looked at Etta. "I'm contacting the IRC." Etta's head snapped up. The Interstate Anti-Racket Commission, the feds, the one group even Cassian couldn't control. "Cassian, you can't be serious. They'll want something in return. They'll want your entire organization." Rowan turned to him, horrified. This was what she had feared. You can't sacrifice your people, your men, just to save me. I won't let you." Cassian met her gaze. The vulnerability from the night before was gone, replaced by the cool certainty of a commander. "Rule 3, Rowan, you protect my choices." He tapped his own chest. "I'm not trading my men. I'm trading my chair. The IR gets Seraphine, her entire network, and the UID agents on her payroll. In exchange, they get the prize they've always wanted me." "They'll arrest you," she whispered. "They'll indict me," he corrected, "but they'll grant me immunity on past syndicate activity in exchange for bringing down a national security threat. The Vale Syndicate dies, but the Hawthorne Circle burns. It's the only way to guarantee your safety. Permanently." The selflessness of the act was so absolute it stunned her. He was dismantling his own empire to clear her name. "We do both," Rowan said, the plan forming, sharp and clear. "We split them. We fight them on every front." They looked at her. "Etta, you and Owen," she commanded, her voice ringing with an authority that surprised even herself. "You go to that hearing, use the threat of the data, tie them up in their own red tape, create a public scene." "And us?" Cashin asked, a hint of a smile on his lips. "You want to hit Seraphine's treasury? It's on the Gilded Osprey, the riverboat casino. It'll be docked for the festival tonight. You hit her wallet while Etta hits her legitimacy." "And you?" he asked, his voice soft. "I go to work," Rowan said, pulling her hair back into a tight bun. "Rule 2. The festival needs a medical coordinator. I'm leading a volunteer EMT team. I'll be exactly where I'm supposed to be, right in the middle of it all. I'll be your eyes on the ground." The festival grounds were a sea of cheerful chaos. Paper lanterns were strung between lampposts, food vendors hawked their wares, and a stage was set up for the evening's music. Rowan, in her official EMT uniform, was directing volunteers, setting up first aid stations, and mapping out evacuation routes. She felt alive, competent, and back in her own skin. "Impressive operation. Always prepared." The voice, smooth and insincere, slid over her shoulder. Agent Marlowe Quist was leaning against an ambulance, hands in the pockets of his trench coat. "Just doing my job, Agent," Rowan said, not turning, her hands busy checking a defibrillator. "I'm glad to hear it, because I'm here to do mine." He moved into her line of sight, his expression one of deep, fabricated concern. "Listen, Rowan, you're in over your head. I know you're not an arsonist, but Cassian Vale, he's using you. He'll drop you the second you're no longer useful." "Is that so?" "I can protect you," he said, leaning closer. "We have an internal witness protection program. No feds, no public record. We get you out of Harbor Bend, give you a new life. All you have to do is tell me where Vale is. Tell me what he's planning." Rowan stopped her work. She turned to him, her hand sliding to her phone, which was already recording audio in her pocket. She gave him a bright, professional smile, the one she used on belligerent drunks and terrified patients. "That's a very generous offer, Agent Quist," she said, her voice clear, "but I think I'll pass. I trust emergency medicine more than I trust secret promises." She picked up her clipboard and walked away, leaving him standing there, his smile frozen and his eyes suddenly cold. She was setting up the main triage tent near the river's edge when a courier in a crisp uniform approached her. "EMT Leduc." "That's me." He handed her a small, elegant box wrapped in black paper and tied with a silk ribbon. "This was delivered for you. No return address." She opened it. Inside, on a bed of black velvet, was a necklace. It was a heavy piece of blue jade, carved into the shape of a crashing wave, suspended from a simple gold chain. It was beautiful, and it was cold to the touch. Beneath it was a thick, cream-colored card. The handwriting was a flawless, feminine script. The color of deep water where the overconfident often drown. Rowan lifted the card, the scent of lilies, cloying and funereal, rose from the paper. It was Seraphine's signature, a threat delivered like a gift. Rowan closed the box. She didn't look scared. She looked at the crowds, at the river, at the Gilded Osprey docked just 100 yards away. The sun was beginning to set. The game was starting. The Gilded Osprey was a 3-tiered fabrication of light, floating on the black mirror of the harbor, its paddle wheel churning lazily. On shore, the River of Lights Festival was a joyful cacophony. On board, the atmosphere was one of high-stakes, breathless silence. Cassian moved through the engine grease smell of the service corridors, wearing the gray uniform of a senior pit boss. His team had neutralized 2 guards and bypassed the digital security on the staff elevator. He wasn't a shadow. He was a ghost in the system. He reached the financial director's private office. The man was downstairs, absorbed in a high-limit poker game Cassian himself had arranged. Cassian didn't bother with the lock. He used the director's own keycard, which one of Cassian's men had duplicated an hour before. The office was silent, behind a heavy oil painting of a clipper ship. The safe was dark steel. He attached a small device to the digital keypad. It ran through 10,000 combinations in 30 seconds, then chirped. The heavy door hissed open. Inside, past the bearer bonds, was a single, silver aluminum briefcase, the full, unedited ledger of the Auric Hands Fund. On the festival grounds, Rowan was in her element. Her radio was alive with chatter. We have 2 primary choke points. She broadcast to her volunteer team, her voice cutting through the noise. The St. Lazarus Bridge ramp and the Hickory Wharf Pier. If a panic starts, those 2 points will crush. I want triage stations established behind those points, not in front. We treat the fallout. We don't become part of it. She was mapping the disaster before it happened, her mind a cold grid of logistics. The first disaster struck, not with a bang, but with a digital scream. The music playing over the festival's massive LED screens died. The screens flickered and then lit up with a single, horrifying image, Cassian's face, taken from a grainy security camera. Beside it, official-looking documents, a purchase order for chemical accelerants, a bank transfer, and a forged signature, crude but plausible, bearing Cassian's name. A new voice, sharp and distorted, boomed over the entire plaza. Citizens of Harbor Bend, the man responsible for the fish market bombing is Cassian Vale. He is trying to start a war. The UID is here to stop him. A wave of fear and anger rolled through the crowd. Shouts of mafia and killer began to rise. The collective joy of the festival curdled. Rowan Owen's voice crackled, tight with panic, in her earpiece. I'm under the main grandstand. They're not just faking it. I found devices, at least a dozen. Smoke bombs and, God, canisters of some kind of chemical agitant. They're going to start a stampede. Rowan's blood ran cold. Seraphine wasn't just creating a story. She was creating a tragedy to prove her story was true. Get out of there, Owen, now! She switched to her main channel. All units, this is Leduc. We have a confirmed hazardous material risk at the main stage. This is a non-urgent medical evacuation. I repeat, a calm evacuation. Section leads, move your teams into the front rows. Focus on families with small children and the elderly. Use the south side exits. Walk. Do not run. Her team moved instantly. They were a disciplined line of red and white, projecting an absolute calm they did not feel. They began to ease people out, lifting strollers over curbs, offering steady arms to the elderly. Rowan herself spotted a mother frozen in panic, holding a small boy's hand. Rowan knelt, smiling at the child. Hey there, we're going to see the big fireworks from a special spot. Let's go. She guided the family, and several others, toward the safe zone, a shield of professional calm against the rising tide of fear. On the gilded Osprey, Cassian had the briefcase. The office door opened. Lyle Crow, Seraphine's personal enforcer, filled the entire frame. He was a wall of tailored muscle, and he didn't waste time on words. He lunged, his right fist coming in a low, brutal arc aimed at Cassian's ribs. Cassian didn't block. He pivoted, letting the punch graze his jacket, and stepped inside Crow's guard. He drove the heel of his palm up, under the man's chin, snapping his head back. As Crow staggered, Cassian grabbed the man's right arm, spun and locked the elbow joint over his own shoulder. He applied pressure. There was a clean, wet pop. Crow screamed, his arm hanging useless. Cassian followed with a precise, measured strike to the man's carotid artery. The enforcer's eyes rolled back, and he slumped to the floor, unconscious but alive. Cassian stepped over the body and walked out. At the community hearing in the Port Authority building, chaos reigned. Agent Quist was on a radio, a smug look on his face. "The feeds are down, Etta," Owen yelled. "He's cut us off. They're the only voice left." Etta's face was pale. He cut the digital stream. He forgot about the analog. She ran to the podium, ripping an old-fashioned microphone from its stand and plugging a small transmitter into the amplifier. She dialed a frequency. He forgot about Harbor Street Radio. Her voice suddenly boomed from every old radio in the plaza. "This is Etta Gray. The documents on the screen are forgeries. We are broadcasting live with the real bank records. The UID's contract with Kestrel Dynamics, the signature on the fish market purchase is a proven fake. You are being manipulated." The crowd near the radio booths paused. They listened. The wave of anger began to stall, replaced by a new, more dangerous confusion. High above them all, on a private balcony of the Port Authority building, Seraphine Hawthorne appeared. She was magnificent in a dark gown, untouched by the chaos. She raised a glass of champagne to the panicked city. "To a new, cleaner port," she murmured. Cassian was on the shore, moving through the thickest part of the crowd, the briefcase chained to his wrist. He saw Seraphine. He saw her toast, and then he saw a flicker of light from the roof of the cold storage warehouse across the plaza. A tiny red laser dot. It swept across the crowd, a predator's eye. It was searching. Rowan was in the middle of the plaza, directing her last team to the safe zone. The red dot found her. It hovered, then settled on the center of her chest. Cassian was 40 feet away. He saw it. His world compressed to that single, burning red point. "Rowan." He didn't shout. He screamed. He launched himself forward, a raw, desperate tackle. He left his feet, shoving aside a barrier, his shoulder driving into the crowd. Rowan heard her name, a sound of pure animal terror. She turned, her eyes wide, just in time to see him flying at her. His body hit hers like a car. The impact drove the air from her lungs, lifting her off her feet and sending them both crashing down onto the stone pavers. The world exploded in a deafening crack. The steel lamppost she had been standing under, 2 feet away, tore apart in a starburst of white-hot sparks and shrapnel. A sniper's round had punched a hole through the metal. Rowan was pinned, her ears ringing, the wind knocked out of her. Cassian was a dead weight on top of her, shielding her entire body. The smell of ozone and gunpowder filled her nostrils. The crowd was screaming, stampeding away from the sound of the shot. She tried to breathe, to speak. He pressed his face to hers, his eyes wild, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He was looking at her. Not the sniper, not the crowd, just her. "Don't close your eyes," he commanded, his voice a low, urgent whisper that cut through the panic. "Look at me." In the stampede following the sniper shot, Cassian had dragged her into the labyrinth of the wharf. He didn't run. He moved with the panicked crowd, using their chaos as his cover until he could pull her sideways, through an unlocked gate, and into the cavernous darkness of Pelican Row. The old boathouse was a graveyard of nautical gear, smelling of salt, tarred rope, and the cold, damp air off the river. The only light was the multicolored bleed of the festival lights through the filthy windows. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving Rowan's hands shaking. Cassian was at the far end of the warehouse, his back to her, the silver briefcase on a workbench beside him. He was breathing heavily, not from exertion, but from a rage so cold it seemed to lower the temperature in the room. He had almost watched her die. "You're going through with it," Rowan said, her voice echoing in the vast space. "The deal with the IARC. Even after this." "More than ever," he replied, not turning. He picked up a heavy wrench, his knuckles white, and then set it down, a visible effort to control his own violent impulse. "This isn't about the port tonight. It's about Seraphine trying to burn the whole city down to get it. My syndicate is a part of this city. Rowan, it has rules. What she's doing. This is an infection." He finally turned to face her. "Etta's deal will stand. When Hawthorne is gone, I turn myself over. It's worth it. Keeping Harbor Bend alive is worth the cost." She looked at him, the man who had been a ghost, then a monster, then a shield. "My mother," she said, her voice quiet. She had this thing she always said. When I was scared, when I was about to do something stupid or reckless, she'd tell me to count to 3. Cassian frowned, not understanding. "Just stop." Rowan continued, and count 1, 2, 3. She said by the time you got to 3, the fear would still be there, but it wouldn't be driving anymore. You would. A shadow of a smile, the one she was beginning to recognize, touched his lips. I've never made it past 1. I know, she said. That, she realized, was the difference between them. He was a creature of pure, immediate action. She was one of measured response, and somehow they had found a balance in the absolute center of the storm. It was cold in the boathouse. She zipped up her heavy EMT jacket, the one she'd had on under her vest. He saw the shiver. He stepped closer, but he didn't reach for her. He didn't try to offer warmth with his body. Instead, he simply put his hand out. She looked at it, then placed her own in his. His fingers laced with hers, a firm, grounding grip. They stood like that for a long moment, hands clasped between them over the thick fabric of her jacket. The sound of the festival music and the distant lapping of the river against the pilings was the only sound. He leaned in, his gaze holding hers, and pressed his lips to hers. It was not the desperate, hungry kiss from the attic. It was a kiss of absolute solidarity. It was brief, warm, and certain. It said, I am here. We are in this together. His breathing was steady. Her heart rate, which had been frantic, slowed to match his. It was a shared moment of stillness, a silent promise before the final act. His phone vibrated. Etta. He put it on speaker. Owen is with me, Etta said, her voice sharp. The crowd is confused, but they're not fully panicked. The radio broadcast is working, but it's not enough. We need something bigger. We have it, Cassian said, tapping the briefcase. The full ledgers, the direct payments from Kestrel, the assassination orders. Rowan's mind was already working, connecting the pieces. The main stage, she said, looking at Cassian. The video feed. Seraphine and Quist hijacked it once. We can hijack it back. Etta, can you patch the radio transmitter into the main festival amplifier? And the video feed, Etta asked. Owen can. Owen's voice cut in, stronger now. The main power junction is under the grandstand. I can bypass their feed and give you a clean signal, but you need to broadcast from somewhere. I'll take the briefcase to the stage, Cassian said. No, Rowan said. They're waiting for that, the sniper. They'll never let you get close. She looked around the boathouse. We do it from here. We broadcast the data from the laptop. Etta, you get back to your legal team. The second those ledgers go public, I want you to hit the send button on the IR conjunction. Freeze auric hands. Freeze everything. Done, Etta said. Owen, you're on the power. Cassian, Rowan. Just stay alive. The line cut. Cassian picked up the briefcase, ready to move. Just then, a text message lit up his phone, an unknown number. Step on that stage. Cassian and the St. Lazarus Bridge collapses. The detonators are in place. How many festival goers are on it right now? Your choice. Cassian's face went blank. He showed the phone to Rowan. A bluff, he said, his voice flat. We can't risk it, Rowan said, her blood turning to ice. The bridge was the main thoroughfare for the festival, packed with families. It's a classic pincer move, Cassian reasoned, his mind racing. She pins me down. She makes me choose between you and the city. She thinks I'll freeze. She's right about one thing, Rowan said. She grabbed her EMT radio from her belt, her hand steady, her voice dropping into the familiar, clipped cadence of command. It's a choice. She keyed the mic. All EMT leads, this is Leduc. We have a credible bomb threat on the St. Lazarus Bridge. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. All units are to execute Evacuation Plan Bravo. Shut down all access to the bridge. North and south. Use medical barriers. I want a hard perimeter in 60 seconds. Go. She turned to Cassian, her eyes blazing. This was her arena. This was Rule 2. You and Owen get the broadcast ready, she said. I'm going to the bridge. My job is to keep those people safe, whether the bomb is real or not. Cassian watched her, the EMT, the leader. He saw the absolute certainty in her, the same certainty he felt when he made a decision. And for the first time in his life, he willingly, completely stepped back. He was not in charge here. She was... "If you tell me to stay behind, I will," he said, and he meant it. "I will cover you from here, but if they target you again, Rowan, if another sniper takes a shot, I'm stepping out of the shadow, deal or not." Rowan clipped the radio back to her belt. She nodded. "That's my choice too." The first firework exploded, a silent flower of crimson and gold against the night sky. In the exact same instant, every LED screen in the plaza, every monitor in the bars, and the giant screen on the main stage went black. Then they lit up as one. Owen had done it. It was not a forged document, it was Etta's laptop screen, broadcast for the entire city to see. The intricate, damning flowchart of the Awoke Hands Fund, the scanned, signed contract between the Urban Intelligence Directorate and Kestrel Dynamics, and finally, a close-up of Seraphine Hawthorne's own signature on a transfer order. Clear as day. A new sound wave rolled across the crowd, not panic, but a low, guttural roar of understanding, of anger. But Rowan's teams were already in place. Their calm presence and established perimeters holding the line. The crowd was agitated, but it was not a mob. It was an audience. Finally, seeing the truth. High on her balcony, Seraphine's face was a mask of disbelief. Her plan was evaporating. She snarled, pulling a small, single-button device from her pocket, the trigger for the St. Lazarus Bridge. She pressed it. From the grandstand, a single, pathetic click echoed over a hot mic. Nothing else. "The line is dead! Rowan," Owen's voice yelled over the radio, triumphant. "I replaced the main detonator line with a dead circuit 2 hours ago. It was a bluff." Agent Quist, his face white with fury, saw his entire operation collapsing. He turned, his eyes landing on Rowan as she stood at the edge of the pier, coordinating her teams. He marched toward her, his hand on his sidearm. "Rowan LeDuc," he bellowed, "you are under arrest for inciting a riot and interfering with a federal investigation." Before his hand could touch her, Cassian stepped out of the shadows of the boathouse. He was unarmed, his hands open and visible at his sides. He walked into the center of the plaza, under the full glare of the stage lights and his own forged mugshot. "I am Cassian Vale," he called out, his voice carrying over the plaza. The crowd went silent. "Everything you see on those screens is the truth. I confirm it, and for my part in this city's shadows, I am ready to pay the price." Seraphine was gone. She had vanished from the balcony. "She's running," Cassian said, his eyes scanning the alleys. "Fable Court. Lyle Crow is meeting her there." "No," Rowan said, pointing to a grated drain pipe near the pier's foundation. "That's a storm drain. It cuts under the wharf. It leads directly to the old signal room on Wharf 14. That's where the backup detonator would be." Cassian didn't hesitate. He kicked the grate open. "After you." They plunged into the tunnel. It was lightless, the air thick and cold, the only sound the rush of tidal water around their ankles. Cassian had a penlight, its thin beam cutting the oppressive dark. The water was rising, pushed in by the tide. They were halfway through when Cassian stumbled, a sharp grunt of pain escaping him. He leaned against the curved, slimy wall. "The wound!" he hissed. The shrapnel wound on his back had torn open from the chase. Rowan was on him in an instant. "Stop!" She pushed him against the wall. 10 seconds. That's all I need." "Rowan, we don't have... 10 seconds, she commanded. In the sliver of light from the penlight, she ripped a sterile compression bandage from her ankle kit. She didn't look at the wound. She felt for it, pressing the bandage against the hot, wet tear in his shirt. "Hold this. Hard." He pressed his hand to his back, his breath catching. It was not a tender moment. It was triage, a desperate, professional act of preservation. It was, for them, the same as a kiss. "Go," she said, and they were moving again. They burst out onto the rooftop of Wharf 14. The wind was high, whipping the flags on the roof. The full display of fireworks bloomed over the city. bathing the scene in frantic, alternating colors. Seraphine stood by the main antenna mast. She was not alone, and she was holding a second detonator, a heavy, military-grade device. "The bridge was a distraction, you fools," she smiled, her voice cold. "This one is for the Gilded Osprey, my own ship, full of my own people. Fear, Cassian, is always marketable, a new tragedy, and I'm the only one left to restore order." Rowan's mind went to her mother's rule. 1, 2, 3. She keyed her radio. "All units, is the St. Lazarus Bridge clear?" A chorus of clear came back. 1. "Etta," Rowan said, switching channels. "Jammer signal. Use the full power of the radio antenna. Now." 2. She saw a public address bullhorn on a security mount. She ripped it free and aimed it at Seraphine. "Seraphine," she yelled, her voice booming across the wharf, amplified by the festival speakers. "You're only strong when we're silent." 3. As if in response, a wave of noise rose from the crowd below. They had heard her. Whistles, air horns, jeers, a deafening roar of public defiance. Seraphine's smile wavered, her composure finally breaking. Lyle Crow, his arm in a crude sling but his eyes murderous, charged from the shadows. He lunged, not at Cassian but at Rowan. Cassian intercepted him. He didn't meet the charge. He used Crow's own momentum, redirecting him, disarming the knife from his good hand. Cassian spun him around, slammed him against the antenna mast, and in one fluid motion, ripped the heavy decorative rope from a nearby flagpole, tying Crow's hands with a series of unbreakable nautical knots, non-lethal, contained. Seraphine screamed in rage, her thumb jamming down on the detonator. Nothing. Etta's signal was jamming her. The rooftop doors burst open. It was Agent Quist, flanked by 2 uniformed UID officers, their faces grim. They were trapped, forced by the thousands of witnesses below and the IARC's legal hammer, which Etta had just brought down. "Seraphine Hawthorne," Quist said, his voice dead. "You're under arrest." As they cuffed her, Seraphine looked past them, her eyes locking on Rowan with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred. The fireworks reached their finale, showering the sky in a riot of light. The noise was overwhelming. Cassian walked toward Rowan, ignoring the blood seeping through his shirt, ignoring the police. He stopped in front of her. He looked at her. The EMT who had saved him defied him and fought beside him. The noise of the world faded. He smiled, the real smile, the one she had seen in the attic. His voice was a quiet murmur, almost lost in the explosions. He wasn't giving an order. He was asking a question. "From now on, stay." Harbor Bend woke up to a city reborn. The morning news was not just reporting, it was reeling. The Auric Hands Fund, the financial engine of Seraphine's empire, had been frozen by federal order at midnight. The Hawthorne Circle, without its money or its leader, had imploded in a matter of hours. The Urban Intelligence Directorate was in chaos, facing a full internal investigation by the IARC. And Agent Marlowe Quist had been indefinitely suspended, his career over. The fog of corruption that had choked the port for months had, in the space of a single, explosive night, finally begun to clear. While the city processed the news, Cassian Vale, his back freshly stitched by Rowan and Etta Gray at his side, walked up the granite steps of the federal building. He kept his word. The deal with the Interstate Anti-Racket Commission was simple and brutal. He handed over the complete, unedited ledger of Seraphine's network, the Kestrel contracts, the offshore accounts, the dirty UID agents. In return, the IARC got the prize they had hunted for a decade. Cassian Vale pled guilty to racketeering and received a suspended sentence, contingent on one non-negotiable condition. The Vale Consortium was to be dismantled. In its place, he would establish and manage the Harbor Bend Port Reconstruction Fund, a legitimate enterprise. He had traded his underworld crown for a public chain, and in doing so, had saved them all. Rowan was formally, and very publicly, exonerated. The arson charges evaporated, her name cleared in a single press release. The first thing she did was put her uniform back on. She returned to her ambulance. Unit 12. The familiar smell of antiseptic and diesel feeling like the first clean breath she had taken in a week. She did not just go back to work, she changed the work. A month later, she was leading a new citywide training seminar for all first responders, crowd panic first aid. The feds offered her the Anonymous Witness Program, a new name, a new life, far away from the port. She turned it down without a second thought. She was staying. This was her city, and she intended to watch it grow. 2 months after the festival, the autumn air was crisp and clear. The Lantern and Lime was a new restaurant, warm and smelling of good food and fresh paint, built on the ashes of the old fish market. It was a small gathering. Etta, Rowan, Owen, and Cassian. Owen raised his glass of beer, a genuine, easy smile on his face. He looked at Cassian, who was nursing a simple club soda. To Harbor Bend's newest model citizen, Owen said, his voice full of mischief. I hear the Port Union is even thinking of endorsing you for the board. Cassian, dressed in a simple button-down shirt instead of a tailored suit, actually laughed. It was a real, unguarded sound that reached his eyes. The ice around him, the armor he had worn for a lifetime, was well and truly gone. After dinner, Cassian and Rowan stood outside on the curb. I don't have a history of giving gifts, he said, his voice quiet. The city sounds distant. He did not pull out a velvet box. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple, polished silver rescue whistle, attached to a heavy-duty keychain. I know you already have one, he said, but I had this one engraved. She took it. The metal was cool and solid in her hand, etched into the side in a flawless copy of her mother's familiar, elegant script, were the words, "Don't let fear choose your future for you." It was not a diamond ring. It was not a promise of forever. It was a promise to live properly. It's perfect, she whispered, her throat tight. She held up a single old-fashioned brass key. I have something for you, too. He recognized it instantly. The Cedar Street Depot, she said. I leased the attic. It's clean now. I put a chair up there, and a table. It's quiet. It overlooks the river. She pressed the key into his palm. For the days you cannot get past one. When you are lost, go there. Count to 3. He closed his hand around the key, the metal warming to his skin. Rowan's ambulance was parked at the curb, gleaming in the autumn sun. She was about to start her shift. The radio was on, a news bulletin playing. While the main UID office has been disbanded, sources say a rogue element within the agency is attempting to revive the Kestrel Dynamics contract through a different subcommittee. The threat was not gone. It was just changing shape. Cassian, who'd been leaning against the passenger door, opened it. He looked at her, a question in his eyes. Ride with me, he asked. Rowan smiled, climbing into the driver's side and buckling in. I drive. You ride shotgun. Before she could start the engine, he leaned across the center console. He put a hand on her shoulder, and she met him halfway. They kissed. There on the sun-warmed brick steps. It was a slow, comfortable kiss. It held none of the desperation of the attic, none of the frantic solidarity of the boathouse. It was a kiss of arrival. Her hand found his, their fingers lacing together. The kiss ended. She put the ambulance in gear. The siren gave a soft, gentle chirp as she pulled into traffic. Cassian Vale, the former king of the harbor, sat in the passenger seat, his seatbelt securely fastened. He looked out the window at Harbor Bend, at the clear sky and the busy streets, as if he were seeing his city for the very first time. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We would love to know where in the world you are listening from, so please leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Story, and like this video. You can also show your support by pressing the hype button to help this story be heard by more people.